Hello and welcome. This is Political Forum for Wednesday, January 11th. Today we welcome 32nd Ward Alderman Scott Waguespack.
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 Yep, that's close.
Okay, thank you.
Scott's good though.
Scott. Thank you for appearing on our Political Forum show.
Thank you for having me.
My name is Freddie Calixto. I'm a board member here at CAN TV. You are watching a live interactive program brought to you as a community service by CAN TV. Be sure to tell your friends that they can also watch the show online at cantv.org/hotline. We welcome your questions and comments for the alderman. Please call at 312-738-1060. In the next 25 minutes, we'll try to answer all your questions on air as possible. Alderman, how are you?
I'm doing great.
That rain, how's that rain out there?
Lightning in the middle of January, it's a little strange.
Yes.
But the city's getting a little bit of a good washing, so maybe that'll help.
That'll help, great. What's going on in the 32nd Ward?
Well, we're keeping really busy. We've had some issues with some flooding that was brought on by some new water and sewer main work. So the last couple mornings I've been dealing with homes that have been getting flooded from actual city department work. But, otherwise, I think over the holidays, we really saw a pretty robust business districts, seeing a lot of customers out there. So our businesses were doing really well. And when we looked at, some of the issues like crime and our education issues, we're always trying to work on those and stay ahead of things. But I think the 32nd Ward is one of those great areas to live in. And we just try to make sure that our staff and the volunteers that we have that are out there every day are really trying to keep up with the things that the residents and businesses need most.
Great. Well, we're welcoming your questions. Please call us at 312-738-1060 if you have a question for the alderman. Let me ask you a question. Almost everybody is talking about the new president-elect to be soon sworn in. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm obviously skeptical like everybody else. I've been very frustrated, not just as a municipal leader, but as a father of two little children and a husband and just a citizen of our city and our state and the United States. And to see somebody like this get into office is very bothersome on many different levels, whether it's his views on foreign policy as we saw today, his connections to these issues with the Russians, his views on immigration and women and LGBT issues. I mean, just across the board, very difficult person that we're going to have to deal with. But I was really enjoying last night's farewell speech by President Obama.
Yes. And
I mean, it almost brought tears to my wife and I were talking about it, and I think she's an immigrant herself, and for us, hearing the speech, I think it was very important. And then, you and I were talking a little bit about what does it say for future leaders of the city, the state, and the United States, and where are those people coming from? They're going to be our kids, and there's this generation out there that we want to get activated because, right around the corner is another presidential election, and we got to change the way we do things. We chatted a little bit about Keith Ellison, who I support for the new DNC chair, and I think he'll help move the country in a different direction. But I met him a few months ago, and I heard this speech this past weekend as well, and he talked about really reaching out to not just the inner city, but to the county level, to the smaller city level, to the small towns out there, and really bringing all Americans into the fold and saying the Democratic Party needs to change its ways too.
Oh, very good. So let's talk a little bit more about yesterday's farewell speech. What will you remember about it?
Well, I think the clipboard comment, which is probably one that everybody's talking about. But it's like, get out there and go get your clipboard and let's talk about the issues. There are things that need to change in Chicago. Chicago really needs to see a sea change in the way we do business, and I would love to see people step up and say that we're going to get rid of the bonds that tie us here in Chicago that have really put the city off on a bad path, and not only change the mayor but change the way we do business overall.
Okay, thank you. I think we have a caller on the line. Caller, what is your question?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. My question is about the news that broke this week about President Obama giving, I think it was about $1 billion for the CTA. I was wondering how soon we will see that effect take place in your ward, and if you have any information on which stops we will see the change take place in first.
Sure. So the caller was talking about the red line improvements for the CTA, and my ward touches a very small portion of the area that would be affected. What they're actually doing is creating a giant TIF that reaches all the way up and down the red line tax increment financing district. And while a lot of us are reluctant to open up new TIFs and we'd like to see other ones close and reform the whole TIF process, which our Progressive Caucus is working on, the red line is in a really bad shape and overall throughout the whole system. And what we're trying to do with this is match the TIF funds that will come from that district to federal funds, the $1.1 billion that President Obama signed off on. The CTA has actually been working on this for several years, and I think they just ran into a point in time where they had to get this thing finalized before the president walked out because of their concern about President-elect, what's his name, Trump, possibly pulling those funds back, which is a possibility, a remote one. But this is really about improving all of the stations, all of the rail. It is a little bit about improving the speed, but the red line really needs the improvements. And public funding has to be put up we have to subsidize public transportation. That's the only way to do it.
Caller, thank you for that question. We have another caller on the line. Caller, what is your question?
Hello.
Hello?
Go ahead, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
So very much for taking my call. I wanted to ask this. I was reading the paper probably less than an hour ago on my phone, and I saw that the Department of Justice is going to deliver a finding that there was a pattern and practice of the police department violating the civil rights of citizens. And I wanted to get your perspective on that, not just as an alderman dealing with the police, but also with the city's reputation for violence in minority communities. And a lot has been said that happens because of the mistrust between the citizens and the police department, and people, then greater likelihood to take matters into their own hands instead of calling the police or going to the courts when there's a dispute.
Yeah, it's so Friday morning. It sounds like the Department of Justice is going to release their investigation into the Chicago Police Department, and it will also touch on the city law department. And our Progressive Caucus has actually asked for an investigation into the law department based on a lot of the information that's been withheld over the last few years, and more so most recently with the Laquan McDonald shooting, with several cases where the federal judges are now saying, you guys in the law department, you're withholding information from people who are representing people who've been shot. That's the wrong way to go about this. This is going to be a very broad cover for this investigation. I think what we got to do as citizens is make sure that we stay vigilant about the findings from that Department of Justice report. That means community organizations and individuals have got to put pressure on the city council, but most especially on the mayor and his law department to say, you're not going to get by with just implementing a handful of the recommendations that they make. These have to be fundamental changes, long-term changes that reach out for years. We have to retrain people in the police department to deal with everything from de-escalation to mental health crisis issues. But a lot of this information has been withheld by this mayor. Everything from the discipline matrix about how officers are disciplined, the training manuals, a lot of information we've been asking for several months, if not years, and you run into a brick wall. I think the most important thing for Chicagoans is we've got to rebuild communities from the block up, build those communities so that the relationship changes within the community first. And I'm talking about every community, not just mine. We try very hard to make sure that everybody's involved in each one of our neighborhoods, and then rebuild the trust with the police department and rebuild the way that our city looks at not only the police, but ourselves as well.
Thank you, caller, for that question. Let's talk about the award and the boundaries. I'm going to put the map up.
Sure. So the 32nd Ward runs from essentially North Avenue to Addison, pretty far over to Racine, and then over to Logan Boulevard. And it entails, it used to go a little further south down here, but it entails communities like Roscoe Village, Wicker Park, Bucktown, Logan Square, Lakeview, and a little bit of Lincoln Park. I always like to say that, I wish aldermen would get a, kind of a square that we could draw squares, because we're the ones who do the lines, and they don't always come out very straight.
Well, that's your contact information there. That's the office address, the phone number, the email, and the website. And let me get back here. Let's get, we were talking about yesterday's farewell speech. The president said our democracy needs us, and not only during an election, but also to be a voice in his words, quote, to show up, dive in, and stay at it. Do you think that that's going to inspire people to show up?
I think it will, and I think it'll be everybody from young to old and everybody in between. We got great organizations in the city. There's organizations throughout the United States that do, a lot of this activism, but it has to reach beyond the people that normally do it. There's good organizations that I love working with, like MCFA Challenge, and that's a lot of our high school students. And I love to get their recommendations about what they think of in terms of democracy. They learn both sides of the coin, whether it's Republican or Democrat, yes. And they learn about democracy, and that's really where we need to focus, is on our children.
Great. We have another caller. Caller, what is your question?
Hello.
What is your question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Could hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Could hear you.
I can't hear you.
We can hear you.
But if you can hear me, nod your head. Hello?
Yes. We could hear you. Yes, we're nodding our head.
Okay, I see you nodding your head. Okay, well, my comment is, like the Chicago police officers, and I was raised in a family with Chicago police officers. My father and my uncles, they was officers, so I know how the system works. But the problem is, what we do is allow a lot of these officers to get away with a lot of things, like the laws that's on the books that they should be obeying. They're not doing it. They come into your house, you call them, and you say, well, I want to make a complaint about et cetera, et cetera. Oh, well, it's not on the books. When was curfew taken off the books? You see what I'm saying? And stuff like that. And another thing, if you want children under 12 years old, then you have to take those kids downtown to the local police office and, tell them where the parents have to come and get them. We are not babysitters. We cannot babysit your kids. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, anybody over 18, they should have ID on them. If they don't have ID on them, it's a law that you're supposed to have ID on you. Okay, and if you're breaking the law and you don't have no ID on you, I'm sorry, you're going to jail. It's just as simple as that. Are you going to be locked up? That way you wouldn't have all these people hanging on the corners.
Thank you for your comments. In response to that?
Well, I think, there has to be a culture change in the police department. That can be helped by hiring new people with different diversity. And not just that, but people who come in that have training from the core. That the first thing that they're thinking about is, how am I representing myself, my family, my community, my city, and how does that translate to doing a good job as a police officer? And I think that what Chicago has missed for a long time, and we're still missing this. I mean, we just had somebody that came in, was supposed to be the new training supervisor for the city, and she left within weeks of being appointed to that position. So we don't even have at the highest level of the police department and city hall, a consistent, a consistency in terms of making sure that we help change that culture. So I think that's the biggest thing, and then building up on that community again, and making sure that children understand, what they need to do and how they can be part of the solution as well. But it's very difficult for these kids, and if the worst thing for me is to just sit here and see time after time people getting shot and on different sides, whether it's a police officer shooting someone or it's the violence that has engulfed this city. And there's some of us that are trying and working with different people to change our positions and our policies on this, but at the highest levels of this city, things are stuck in gear and they're not moving.
Thank you, caller. You're watching Political Forum, a community service of CAN TV. I'm Freddie Calixto, a CAN TV board member. This is live interactive show, so please call with your question for the alderman at 312-738-1060. There's another question I have for you, so we don't have a caller. News came out recently that Illinois is poised to require lead testing in schools and daycare centers. What are your thoughts?
I think it's fantastic. When you look at what happened in Flint, Michigan, the same thing could happen here in Chicago. And our progressive caucus in the city council, and there's only 11 members, we've been pushing very hard for the last year and a half or so to get better testing and find out what the results of that are. And it's testing not just at CPS. So when we drove the question really hard, all of a sudden you saw a reaction from both CPS, the water department, and the health department here in the city and saying, okay, we're going to go out there and get on top of this. But they did it in reaction to very intense media scrutiny from the Tribune on this issue of the lead testing. Michael Hawthorne's been pushing it very hard. And what we've been looking at in the council is saying we want to see all this data. We want to see the areas in the different communities where these children are affected. And I believe, like some other people do out there, that the issue of lead, the issue of these other substances in our, not only at schools, in the drinking fountains, in our parks at the drinking fountains, but in our own homes where these old pipes exist, it is causing fundamental problems, health problems with a lot of our children and our families. In Chicago, it is going to cost a lot of money, but we need to address the issue.
Oh, thank you. It's a problem that we have throughout the city of Chicago.
Yeah.
Let's see. It was announced today that the Justice Department will soon release the results of the investigation into the CPD, and I think we just talked about that. So that was the question we covered already. And what about the unclaimed rebate money?
Well, that's an interesting one, and the property tax hike that we saw last year was the largest one in Chicago history. And I know in the last election there was, talk about what some other candidate was going to do, but it was a $588 million tax hike. I voted against that for several reasons. Part of the reason I vote against some of these issues is that there is a lack of transparency, that things are hidden. We see thousands of emails that the mayor has secreted away and won't disclose what's happening with a lot of those city business that he's conducting on his private email. But I think what we're really looking at here is not just a rebate, which is very difficult for you to get into your hands from the property tax hike that you're receiving, but the broader issue is what are we doing with those funds? What is the process for it? And because we set aside $20 million, as some of you might have heard, and some of it goes to different programs, not all of that was going through a process in the city council where it was open and transparent. And I think that it just, again, goes to this broader issue of if we're borrowing billions of dollars, do you really know where that money's going? Because I don't. And as much as we try to break that open and find transparency, what we find a lot of times is just a high level of, at the highest level is just a wall that we always run into to try to get information out. So that's something that every citizen out there should be concerned about.
Okay, thank you for that response. Please call if you have a question for the alderman, 312-738-1060. I was reading something on your website about point-in-time homeless count volunteer opportunity. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So every year we try to find volunteers to go out and help count all of the homeless people throughout the city so that the Department of Family Services can, work with the different agencies out there. And most of the people doing this work are volunteers. They work in, different family service type agencies throughout the city and the state. And, unfortunately, we've seen an increase in people that are homeless throughout, not only my ward, but throughout the city. And I'd like to see a more robust, department that really goes out there and works with them and tries to get them from the street into affordable housing. We had brought up the issue of Lathrop Homes earlier, how we're watching as, just near my ward, how 500 plus homes are going to be demolished that are actually affordable units to make way for retail and one of the mayor's favorite developers. And I think that's the wrong way to go about things when we have so many homeless people out on the street and so many people that are in need of housing, and we're sitting there tearing down, well over 500 units. So it's an issue that I have a lot of concern for.
I think we have a caller on the line. Caller, what is your question?
Yes, I rent an apartment, and I have a question concerning the recycling law. I believe in the next 30 days or sometime in February that landlords are supposed to make sure that we residents can be able to recycle all of our papers and whatnot in a bin. This has been a challenge in the past with my landlord, as he said that it wasn't cost effective to do this, but now apparently the city is forcing him to do it, but I haven't seen him put out that bin yet. So what steps do I need to take?
Okay, well, you can either call 311 or you can call my office, that number down there, but it's we'll just switch back over to here. You can email us or call at this number here. For, residents in my ward, but 311 could help you out with that too, to report that. And what we try to do is encourage all of these landlords, and it sounds like you might be in a building that has 5 or more units. And if that's the case, then yes, they do have to provide those bins. And I think the Streets and Sand department is finally kind of getting up to speed and really going to be checking on a lot of those buildings. So if you can call it in and kind of nudge your landlord to get that going, we really need a better recycling program throughout the city, and I think this will help. But whatever you can do to call in would be helpful.
Thank you, caller, for that question. Can you share a little bit about the Progressive Reform Caucus that you're chair of? And talk a little bit about
So
it?
when I first started in 2007, it was Tony Preckwinkle, Rick Munoz, Joe Moore was around at the time, and so there was sort of a very small, you can count them on one hand, of progressives. And over the years, as I've been working with different aldermen that have come into the council,
Yes.
Out of the 50, we now have 11. And, I think that says a lot about the group of people that we have. We're a very diverse group, Black, Hispanic, white. We are from all parts of the city, many different neighborhoods from the south side, southwest, west, and north, northwest. And I think that what we're trying to do is just provide better education for voters out there, for citizens, to say, here's a better way of doing business in the city, and we as the Progressive Caucus can help you with that. And we're on Facebook. We have our own website. We don't have it here, but if you just type in Progressive Caucus Chicago, you'll find out which members we are and what we're up to. And we've passed a lot of transparency ordinances. We've really pushed back on this transparency issue and the secrecy issue, and I think we've been making a lot of headway.
Great, thank you for that, filling us in on that. Time is running out. We're about to end this show. Is there any last thoughts you want to share about the 32nd Ward?
Yeah, I think on a couple issues we
Yes.
probably need like 2 hours.
Okay.
But I really thank everybody for tuning in, and I always appreciate being on CAN TV. It's a great organization. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being with us. We appreciate you. And thank you all the callers that called in tonight.